You're listening to a podcast from The Word.
Well, welcome to another Word in Your Ear. I'm delighted to say we're joined by a man who's been a feature of my life since about 14 years old, I think, since when I first saw Peter and Gordon on the television and thought, what an enviable life that appears to be. A young man appears to be having enormous success, and Paul McCartney's his mate, and Jane Nash is his sister, and then it all went wrong after that because he turned into a kind of international career, producing and managing all sorts of extraordinary artists. Linda Ronstadt, James Taylor, Randy Newman, Joni Mitchell, being involved in just about everything interesting in the music business and still doing it all those years later. So I'm delighted to say we're joined by Peter Asher. Peter, lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you. Good to see you too. Good to be here. Thank you.
And you're in Los Angeles, which is home.
I'm in Malibu, yes, which is Los Angeles, really.
Right. Okay.
But on the beach.
Now, when I first saw you, you entered my life on probably on Radio City Go or something like that, doing World Without Love. What year was that? 65, probably
64.
64.
Yeah.
Okay, 64. By then, you were already quite a seasoned entertainment show business professional, weren't you? In the sense that you'd had a kind of acting career as a child, hadn't you? Before that,
yes, I was a child actor first. I started when I was 8. Yeah, did my first film when I was 8. My first film was very distinguished in that my mother in the film was played by Claudette Colbert. So, those of us old enough to remember Claudette Colbert, who was a gigantic American movie star, and so I got to kiss Claudette Colbert at a very young age, which was exciting.
Grief. And you were also
Didn't you get into that career because you were stopped on the street by a talent scout with your sisters? Wasn't that right?
Sort of. It was in the park. Yes, I think because we all three had red hair and were graded in height, years apart. Somebody said to my mother, I've got this agent you should meet. That you can make some money of those kids or whatever she said. I don't know.
Yeah.
And but anyway, we were excited by the idea, so we went off and signed up with this agent, and we all got work. Actually, we never did do anything, all three of us together, unfortunately. But Jane and I did an episode of Robin Hood together.
Yes, I'm going to say, and I think I can vaguely remember it.
We were a couple of peasant children, but I was in several episodes of Robin Hood. Mostly, I was playing Prince Arthur, but then eventually I got demoted to peasant child, and the two of us, our father was wrongfully accused, and we went to Robin Hood for help.
But you'd by the time you started playing music, that had kind of gone. The acting career had finished, hadn't it? Really?
Well, there was a degree of overlap. I mean, I did a lot of BBC radio. I don't know if anybody remembers Jennings at school.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Were you in there?
Yes.
I was Derbyshire.
Oh, wow!
Oh, fantastic!
Good
so,
work.
And I did that. I don't know the exact chronology of it, but I did a lot of radio. So, because that was, you could do it all in a day. You'd rehearse in the morning but I was also singing. So, a bit, but not doing gigs or anything. But yeah, there was a little bit of overlap, but because of course we were a very music-oriented family anyway, because our mother was a professional musician, so the house was full of music. My father was a big music fan, big Gilbert and Sullivan fan, and played the piano, and so on. So music was very much part of our lives.
Can you remember the first time you played, professionally on the stage in front of people?
That would probably have been at a party at school, that kind of thing, if you count that as professional. But I mean, that was sitting in the corner of the room deliberately. Now we're going to do some songs and entertaining people. It's really all the same from then on, just where you're playing and the size of the audience that changes. But so we it's the first time we did it other than for ourselves was at school. Yeah.
Right. And then Peter and Gordon, you got you got a residency, didn't you, in the West End when you're still quite young?
Yeah. We played at a place called the Pickwick Club, which was it was named the Pickwick Club after the musical because it was owned by Leslie Brickus, who you may know was a brilliant man who died very recently and is sorely missed. He and I think probably Anthony Newley, but he was there less. They were partners. that was why it was called the Pickwick Club, because they had the Pickwick musical, which was a success in London, I think, but I don't think it made it across to America. But that's why
that's where you were signed, wasn't it? Were you signed to the Pickwick?
Yes.
So what happened there?
Norman Newell, very traditional A&R guy in a shiny suit, came up to us after our set and said that he liked the way we sounded and would become an audition, which meant going to EMI Studios, as it was called then. They hadn't switched the name to Abbey Road yet. And EMI Studios, and recording several of the songs that we'd done live, just the two of us on a mic, which was very exciting. And they offered us a record deal. He liked the way we sounded, and he had some. He already had some. Sorry, I got distracted by watching an email arrived in the other corner of my screen. Something I have to change today. But yeah, he'd already picked out some songs from our live set. And I think at the time he was imagining us being sort of England's answer to the folk boom, as it were.
Yes.
Peter and Paul without Mary, or the Kingston duo kind of thing. But then he picked out 500 Miles he particularly liked our arrangement of. And I think had we not found some other songs, one in particular, that would probably have been our first single. We would have been somewhere in the folk world.
How did you arrive at that look? Because I think Mike Myers said that he'd based his Austin Powers character. Isn't that right? On you in Peter and Gordon with the slightly frock coat thing.
To be fair, not exactly. I mean, yes, the look of Austin Powers derived to some extent from some particular pictures of me.
Yeah.
So he can point to a couple of specific pictures. But how did I arrive at glasses and bad teeth was that I had bad eyesight and bad teeth. So, and I got my teeth fixed when I got to America. I mean, there was nothing wrong with them, except there were too many of them, and they were all crowded and crossed over in the traditional British style. So that look, apparently, and yes, I wore the frothy shirts and that kind of stuff. So yes, the look of Austin Powers derived from the photos of me. But people go, "Oh, so Austin Powers was based on you?" And I go, "No." Apparently, Simon D was one of the role models.
Oh, yes, he would. Yes,
he would have been. Absolutely,
there were all kinds of. So I'm always very anxious to say, when people go, "Oh, so can we just say Austin Powers was based on you?" I said, "No, so definitely not." But we did contribute to his fantastic look, which was me.
So first single, World Without Love, was that the first single? It was
yes.
That was number one, is that right?
Yes. In 30 countries, I think.
Ultimately, number one everywhere, number one in America eventually, wasn't it?
Yes.
So how old were you at the time?
Sorry?
How old were you at the time?
20, I suppose.
Right.
I was born in 44. I'm pretty bad at dates, but I do remember that it was 64, and I do remember that I know for a fact that I was born in 44, so 20.
Right. And so that was a Lennon McCartney song or a Paul McCartney song?
It was a Paul McCartney song.
Right. And how did you get that?
Well, as you know, he was living in our house. He and I shared the top floor of the house, so I got to hear various songs at various stages of completion, and I remember hearing this song "Well Without Love," and which wasn't finished. Apparently, Paul wrote it when he was like 16. It was pre-Beatles, I guess, but it wasn't finished. And John apparently dismissed it as a potential Beatles song because he thought in particular, the lyric was ridiculous. When Paul started off the song, "Please Lock Me Away," John would interrupt him and say, "Okay, I will. The song's over." So they weren't going to do it. And Paul's gone on record as saying he didn't think it was sort of up to their standard, I guess. But he didn't like it as much as I did. So when we got this record deal and Norman said, if you have any other ideas of songs to do, other than the ones that he'd already chosen from listening to our live show and the audition tape, bring them along. And I said, maybe I do. And went back to Paul and said, could we have a go at that song? And could you please finish it? And he said yes and yes. And eventually, as I recall, I did have to nag him slightly as the session day drew near, Norman had said he was booking some great musicians, which he did, and set a day aside at Studio 2 in EMI Studios. And this wasn't, we weren't contracted for an album at that point. It was, go in the studio, cut 4 or 5 songs, and we'll decide, if we have a single. But that's when I went back to Paul, and he did eventually take his guitar and go into his room for, a stunningly short, like 7 or 8 minutes. And
unbelievable.
No, seriously, people think people laugh when I say that always, but that's true. I mean, those of you, how long can it take to write? So I wait, and in a while I will see my true love smile. She may come, I know not when. When she does, I'll know. So baby, until then, that was it. That was the bridge. So you either have ideas like that in your head, or you don't. Most of us don't. But he did, and gave us the bridge and wrote out the lyrics and the chords for me, which he did for the whole song. A piece of paper, which you may well guess is
and you still have it, don't you?
I do. It's locked in a fireproof safe. I always make the joke on stage that, when the music business goes to shit completely, I can run to Sotheby's as fast as my legs can carry me, and Paul can save the day yet again. It hasn't come to that yet, but you never know.
Do you have loads of souvenirs of the old days? You don't really?
No.
You don't have old records or anything like that? Really?
No, I used to have a white album, number like 11 or something, and all kinds of stuff that has disappeared into the mists of time.
Oh, dear God. So Peter and Gordon had a number of hits. It went on for quite a while, didn't it, really? I mean, the kind of beat boom success for quite a while.
Yes.
Right.
You don't ask me how long, because, as I said, I'm not so good at dates, but several years, yeah.
Right.
And if you didn't write records that time, you didn't write the song. In fact, the amounts of money you earned were very, very slight, weren't they?
Correct.
What would you earn from a million-selling record?
Well, we a million-selling single.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We used to get the royalty then for the Beatles and us was a penny a record, which sounds bad enough until you read the small print, which says half royalties overseas.
Yes.
Which means so in America it was a halfpenny a record, which I think means it's about £4,000 on a million seller, I think.
Yeah, right.
Then commissions then divide by 2.
Yeah.
So no, you were not about to
retire.
No.
But the thing you early on, the thing you were really interested in doing was producing.
Yes.
Is that fair to say? So what was your first experience of doing that? What was it like producing records in the 60s?
Same as it is now, really. The first time I was in the studio, I knew I wanted to be a record producer. The first time I figured out what a record producer does, the fact that you can hire musicians much better than yourself and tell them what to play, seemed brilliant to me. What kind of a great job is that, And so I knew that was something I wanted to do. And what's worth noting is that now, of course, when you want to be a producer, you sit down at your laptop and you produce. You come up with a track, a groove, a beat, or whatever. And you can sit there by yourself saying, here's what I can do. Back then, there was literally no way to demonstrate any ability to produce records other than having musicians in a real studio. Without that, you just couldn't. You had to talk your way into the fact that you might be able to do it. And so I owe Paul Jones a great debt of gratitude, because Paul Jones was a dear friend of mine and is to this day. And I haven't seen him for a while. And as you know, one of the great harmonica players in music and a cool guy altogether. And he was going to make a solo album. And he'd watched me working on some of the Peter and Gordon records, of which I was never officially the producer, but I was the interfering artist. So I, would get very involved in the arrangement and what the musicians played and so on, and the sound. And so Paul asked me if I would like to produce some tracks for this upcoming album. And I jumped at the opportunity. The first record I produced was a Bee Gees song called "And the Sun Will Shine," which hadn't been a hit for the Bee Gees, and I really liked the song and thought it could be a success. And so I produced that with Paul Jones. That was my very first record. I wanted to take no chances and get a really good rhythm section on that record. You may know the story or not, but so I I booked a good band. I had Nicky Hopkins playing piano. My friend Paul Samwell-Smith, great producer himself, of course, went on to do Cat Stevens and Carly Simon and all that. He played bass. I asked him if he could bring along the guitar player in his band, because I didn't know Jeff Beck, but I thought he was very good. So I asked Paul if he would ask Jeff if he would come and play, which he said yes. So I had Jeff Beck on guitar. Who did I say? Nicky Hopkins on piano, Paul Samwell-Smith on bass, and Paul McCartney playing drums.
McCartney on drums. That's right.
Yeah.
Incredible.
And that was, it wasn't a hit. It did bubble into the charts and bubble out again, but it's a good record. I still listen to it today and go, it's pretty good. Could have been.
But around this stage, you were offered a job by Paul McCartney, in fact, to come and work at Apple and be kind of head of A&R. So
Yes.
give us some idea of what, I mean, just had it's unbelievably chaotic, but I mean, what kind of people were approaching you for record deals? What kind of people were sending you tapes?
Oh, well, the tapes, of course, came from thousands of people. I mean, Apple had an active campaign. One of the differences we were going to create was that, unlike record companies that, we do not accept unsolicited material, blah, blah, blah. You had to come through a lawyer or a manager or something. At Apple, we said, please send us your stuff. We took ads in Melody Maker and NME saying, send us your tapes. And we got thousands.
Surely a mistake.
And I had a team of about 4 people, I think, that helping me listen to all the crap that came in. And unfortunately, it wasn't any good.
And nothing came out of that, did it?
No, I don't think so, except maybe, I don't know how George Harrison was enamored of this guy, Brute Force, who had that record, The King of Fur. Are you familiar with that?
No, I don't know that.
Well, there's a guy called Brute Force who's still around.
Really?
And he wrote a song called I Am the King of Fur, the lyrics of which were, I'm the king of fur, I'm the fucking king, and I'm the fucking. So George thought this was hilarious, and we signed him. And the fucking came out, and to EMI's consternation. And not sure what happened to him, but I think he's still around. But no, I don't remember how that came in. That might have been a sent-in tape. But no, we were disappointed. Most, it was, some of it was just not very good. Some of it would be people sending, 100 pages of certifiably mental lyrics where they're absolutely certain that John Lennon's going to set them all to music for them and things like that. So it was tricky.
But what are the people?
I would have a weekly A&R meeting with as many Beatles as were around and some of the other people at Apple, and play whatever had survived the sifting process that our assistants had subjected it all to.
But then James Taylor turned up at your door.
Yes.
Through a mutual acquaintance.
Yes.
And you described...
You want the whole thing from the beginning? But yes, you summed it up very concisely.
But you talked about hearing, because he came over, I think, to your place and bought a guitar and bought a tape. And you talked about being completely bowled over by his musical ability and the quality of the songs. Describe what impression he made.
Well, he was a tall, gangly, very reticent person, and incredibly good looking, but very mysterious looking. And every aspect of the music. I mean, if you think about it, his guitar playing is uniquely brilliant. He's still underrated as a guitar player in my view. And his singing was fantastic because he had a folky voice. At that time, don't forget that if you had long hair and played the guitar, acoustic guitar, you were a folk singer, regardless of whether you never sang a folk song in your whole life. The term singer-songwriter had not, curiously, been invented. I know it sounds like a term that's been around forever, but it hasn't. Nobody said, oh, if you heard James Taylor and Joni Mitchell, great singer-songwriters. They said great folk singers. And then his songs were amazing because he used all these chords that were more like R&B chords, from a Manhattan's record or something. And it was clear that while he sang with a folky tonality to some extent, his singing idols were not, Bob Dylan and John Baez. They were Sam Cooke and Ray Charles.
Yeah,
you know? And so I was super impressed, and I, famously had a conversation that, to the best of my recollection, really is, it's funny you arrived today because I've just got this new job. I'm head of A&R for a record company. Would you like a record deal? And he said, yes, please, I'd love one. And that was it.
And it's the Beatles record.
And it's the Beatles record.
Yeah, it's the Beatles record company. And I took him by the office in a matter of days, and when I got to the office, I said, are there any Beatles in the house? And it was Paul and George who were there, so they listened to James. I mean, I could have signed him anyway because I had made it clear that if I was going to be head of A&R, I wanted the right to sign people. But at the same time, signing somebody who was not liked and admired by the board of governors or directors or whatever they were, owners, would have been pointless.
Yeah.
But so the fact that he was so shy is interesting.
They all shared what?
The fact that he's so shy, he was so shy is interesting. You didn't think that was going to get in the way of his ability to be a self-promoter?
No, it didn't really occur to me. I just thought it was amazing.
But the first record comes out on Apple and gets good reviews, but doesn't really do anything. And Apple falls up, is on the point of falling apart. You eventually get him a deal at Warner Brothers.
Yes,
and that's Sweet Baby James. And the thing
we agreed that because I was going to leave Apple and he wanted to as well. He met Alan Klein, didn't like him. I knew Alan Klein by previous reputation through some friends in New York, and they didn't like him. And so we were leaving, and then at that point we agreed that I would become his manager. We said, because it was clear that we needed somebody, and we didn't know anybody else we trusted to do it. So I said, well, I'll do it. And he went, okay. And I figured, how hard can it be? And certainly when you think about it, it's like nowadays when people say to me, what's the secret to being a great manager? And it's pathetically simple. It's a great client. Because if you think about it, I mean, I inducted the first two managers ever inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They asked me to do it. And they of course, were Brian Epstein and Andrew Lou Goldham. It's like, duh. What was their secret? Oh, that's right. The Rolling Stones and the Beatles. So yes, I figured, Brian Epstein ran a record shop, and his primary genius was the fact that he realized how great the Beatles were, and he believed in them completely, and he dedicated himself to them with determination and honesty. So I tried to do the same.
So with James Taylor, when the breakthrough with Sweet Baby James, and it's amazing to listen to that record nowadays because it was so against the grain of loads of things that were going on in popular music at the time, wasn't it? It felt as if we'd come out of a period of great busyness. And suddenly the thing about James Taylor was it was calm. It was personal. Is that fair to say? Yes, that's fair to say. Is that a quality you try to get into the record? Because you're obviously the producer.
Not specifically, no. I mean, my aim as a producer is pretty much always the same, which is how to make the best possible version of that song as a record, So which is what it's based on. I wasn't thinking about calmness or, because later on James, of course, became, people actually make fun of it because he was the lead advocate of this what was conceived of as very calm, sweet kind of music. Of course, it wasn't really. A lot of those songs were about fairly brutal topics, and and James's life itself was by no means, all sunshine, and so.
But the success of that record did sort of change the music industry slightly, didn't it?
Yes, I mean, when they put him on the cover of Time magazine, I think it was James Taylor, the new rock, soft and low, or something, and it changed things and made the acoustic guitars cool again in a way. But as I said, that was when, suddenly Neil and Joni and James were singer-songwriters, folk singers. And it was different. The folk clubs were a different kind of phenomenon. It was a bunch of revolutionary lefties playing clubs. Suddenly the singer-songwriters was the people playing arenas and stadiums.
Well, you put him on. I think you put him on supporting the Who. You got him a support stop with the Who.
He did a couple of dates opening for the Who.
I can't really imagine how that would have gone, but it worked.
Yes, it worked. Well, here's the thing: we were playing clubs And if we played a folk club, there might be 50 people there. It might be less. Nobody knew who he was. So when I got him these Who dates, yes, a good 70% of the audience weren't paying attention. But the 30% down the front who were going, who is this kid? And what, this is good. Was more than we would have played to any other way. So I remember walking around the back that particular gig, this was a terrible mistake because people are in the back talking and trying to pick up women and making drug deals or whatever they were doing. They were not listening. But as you got to the front, you could gradually feel a whole segment of the crowd, maybe the front quarter or third or whatever it was, were discovering James Taylor, which is what this was all.
That's one of the things that people say about managers. I know you say that the secret of being a good manager is you have a great client. Is good managers spend a lot of time looking at the audience, don't they?
I suppose that's true. Yeah, I certainly did. Yes. I mean, interesting.
Seeing what songs have what reaction.
Well,
just relaying that to the artist.
Yeah.
So you've managed a number of people, at different times over the years. Is it just in response to them asking you, is it? Or have you...
In Linda's case, yes. Linda was the next person I signed.
Right.
Yes, and I'd heard her in New York. Someone had told me to go down to the bitter end where she was playing and said, this girl's got the most amazing voice you've ever seen. And she sings barefoot in these short shorts and is spectacular. And it was all true. And she asked me, first of all, if I would help her finish her record. She'd worked with a couple of different producers and the record was in a bit of a muddle. And I did. And then she asked me if I would be her manager. And then the next album was the one that I produced from beginning to end, which was Hard Like a Wheel. And
and you had to extract her from Herb Cohen, who's Zappa's manager, who's manager. So you must have had an enormous amount of belief in her to have gone through all that. So what was it about her that made you think she was going to be that commercially successful?
Well, again, like James, it was everything. I mean, what's not to love? She was the most amazing singer I'd ever heard. And she was, incredibly good looking. And brilliant, turned out. That's a surprise. And that's what a lot of people failed to grasp because she's, this super hot chick. And people wouldn't occur to people that she's also one of the most remarkably well-read and brilliant women I've ever met and still is. Visit her whenever I can. She's not well, as you know, but she's still in tip-top condition mentally, which isn't always the case with the disease that she has, but she's doing fine and remains one of the most spectacular women I know.
So you're still involved in the music business today?
Oh, yes.
What sort of things are you doing?
I just finished making an album with Susanna Hoffs, who I've always
right.
been a huge fan of, from the Bangles. Love her singing. And she and I started talking and we decided to make a record together, which is coming out in April for various reasons. But she's doing great. And the album came out really well. So I'm proud of that one. I do a weekly radio show. I do all kinds. I consult for BMG. I do a lot of stuff.
Are you constantly spotting songs and thinking,
yes,
that would, okay.
Yes, I'm very interested in this. I've never been one of those, they don't write songs like that anymore. Back in my day, all that shit.
Right.
There's some amazing songwriters. Holly Humberstone is great. There's so many, forget. I keep a little list, which I don't remember in my head.
I'm very impressed by the fact that, it's very easy if you're kind of our age to think that somehow music was better in the 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever. But you don't think that, do you? You think it's just as good now?
No, exactly. I don't.
And give us some examples of other people that you rate really highly. I think you saw Ed Sheeran very early on, didn't you? And immediately imagined he was going to have an international success.
I did. I mean, he was big in England, or it was around the time. What do you call it? Breathing in Snowflakes. 18 was a hit in England. But I've heard him and went, who's this? This is great songwriting. And since then, Ed and I have become friends. And I did work with him in the studio on one track for an Elton tribute album. We did a version of Candle in the Wind. But no, he's extraordinary, incredibly hardworking, incredibly determined, and a brilliant songwriter. Yes. I'm trying to remember the names. As I say, I keep a list that I don't know where I put it. Because every now and then you hear people, God, there's a, sorry, I can't remember.
No, don't worry.
Don't worry.
Yeah, I'll come up with some people.
Somebody's just written a book about you.
Yes.
Which is presumably because you haven't written one yourself. I
wrote a book based on my Beatles radio shows. So I did write a book, but it wasn't about me. No, I turned down all the offers to write an autobiography because I just don't fancy doing it, figuring out what you put in, what you leave out, and and all that. So, but when somebody came to me and said, I want to write a book about you, I kind of went, well, okay.
Right.
You don't need me to do that, necessarily. And
were you pleased with it?
Yeah, it seems generally accurate to me. It's long, but I did eventually read pretty much all of it. But it's I was surprised and I said, I don't think you'll have it. I don't think you'll find a publisher. Eventually, he did. Not easily, but he did. Yeah.
Well, look, Peter, it's been lovely to talk to you. All the very best with your next project, Susanna Hoff's record.
Yeah, it comes out in April. Very good.
Comes out in April.
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.